All right, we are in business. Welcome everybody to our April Mallets and Manuscripts meeting. Got some really fun pieces on the docket for today. A little bit of chamber music, some duets, and like a marimba method book, if you will. So thanks for being here if you're on the call now, and thank you for those that are checking out the YouTube video after the fact. So I've got a couple of things I've suggested on here. Hannah sent in a piece. Lewis also sent in a piece. Lewis, do you want to go first, or I can take the reins? Or...
Yeah, that'd be good. I can start.
Cool, great.
If you don't mind sharing the score and video, and I'll talk a little bit about the piece. So Alex Howley is the composer. He and I went to school together at Texas A&M Commerce. He's a year younger than me, so we overlapped for 3 years. And he was one of those people who's like really great keyboard player, especially, but took comp lessons. I think he studied with Dwayne Rice, was his kind of primary comp teacher, just took lessons with him outside of school, and wrote a lot of marimba music while we were in school together, and then had been working at Lone Star Percussion, rest in peace, for the last several years, and is now working for some other like corporation in the DFW area doing NetSuite stuff. And so when Lone Star went under, he just went to coding boot camp and now has like a real day job. And so I had lined up this commission from him because I really wanted him to write for our students, and just to like get him writing again. And now that he's doing that full-time job, he's like, I don't really need the money for score sales, and I don't have the time or energy to dedicate to all of the things that it would take to sell scores. So he's very kindly allowed me to like take the lead on just distributing performance materials to people that want them. And my goal is that people play this piece. So that's kind of the sell. The piece, it's called Phases, and it's got a subtitle, which is A Bop. And it is basically this like romantic Chopin-esque figuration in the keyboards for Glock and Vibes, and then 2 toms players, and then there's a beat drop with a launch pad at the end. And so it sounds like Chopin with a drop, which is Alex Howley to a T. The level is like pretty solidly intermediate. I was able to put one of my more experienced students on the vibe part, and he could read it pretty comfortably. A double bassist who has some percussion experience, like did some work to learn the Glock part, but I think it really stretched him. And then like one drumline member on tom part, and one very fresh, like first semester percussion ensemble student on a tom part. And then one of my music major non-percussionists who plays percussion, but like general music major on the launch pad part. So that's kind of the difficulty scheme. Joseph, if we could share the score and video. Yep. I want to do the spot at letter B, which is like a minute 10 or 12 in, kind of like halfway through B. I just really like this Glock part.
Let me see if let me download the score really quick, and can I put it in the chat?
Yeah, or I can send it right now too.
Oh, that'd be good.
I'll do that if you do video.
Yep, I got you. Okay, and could you repeat that timestamp for me one more time?
Yeah, like 1 minute 12 seconds.
Got it. Okay.
4.5 minutes in or so.
Yep.
So that's that, and I'm trying to figure out how to upload a file to the chat.
Here, I do have the score pulled up, so I can just,
Sweet.
actually, I add this to my Google Drive. Mhm. And then I can, wait, no, never mind. I'll just share my screen. That's easier. Sorry.
Okay.
All right, there's the score. So we were at letter B
Yeah.
in the first section of listening.
Yeah. And one thing that I really like that Hallie did with this is in each of the drum parts, it is a lot of repetitive kind of figures in the layering. And so it's not like you're reading a different rhythmic grouping every beat.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really like he constructed it for people who are maybe playing in percussion ensemble for the first time.
The letter for the very end was that letter E? Is that correct?
I think letter F or G,
That's right.
wherever that beat drop was. F is like the halftime, and then G is when the drop happens. I will say some of those like grace note figures in the drums required a little bit more nuance than we had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the indication here too, the at G with the mallet parts to kind of be like, look, I know you have activity, but please just sustain,
Yeah, and then each of those amounts of slashes, 1, 2, or 3, is a different hi-hat sample.
Nice.
So we did this on like the 8x8 grid drum pad.
So was the student, was it they hit the pad in time and the track played, or was it they were playing the part on a set of pads?
They were like finger drumming through the whole thing.
Cool. Nice. Yeah. That was one of my questions. It was like, specifically about that part. Was it like a sample or was it it is a sample, I guess, but was it a track or was it someone in real time playing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be finger drummed. Like it could be on a mallet station. I think it could probably like it could be on a DTX or could be adapted to be a track.
Right.
With not a ton of effort. But part of this too is the music technology lab through the composition area. We had also just acquired a launch pad with no plans to use it. It was like the lab should have this for all of the producers who are taking musicianship 4 at the end of our theory sequence. And I was like, Alex, we have a drum machine. Can we use it? And it worked. So it's one of those like weird gray area pieces where we only have one 5-octave marimba, and really like one functional marimba, and so I've been kind of radicalized in this job into finding pieces that are going to fit our group and fit our instrumentation, and trying to do things that are accessible while also having these idiosyncratic resources of like, I can bring my pants to school. We have all of this technology. We can do fixed media now. So I wouldn't call this accessible, but it is something that if you have this one bit of tech can make an intermediate piece sound way cooler than it is in a lot of ways. And I think just expands them past like the other accessible pieces that we're playing.
Can I ask, so the second, or like one of the parts is listed as bongos. Did you guys just try bongos and it didn't work out and the tom interplay seemed to work better, or?
Yeah, I talked to Alex about it and he was like, really just like two pairs of drums. I really liked how the bongo samples sounded in the MIDI that he sent because he did all of this in FL Studio and then notated it. But balance wise, I wanted really low toms to fill out the bottom register of the sound because there's a couple of bass drop samples that don't come through well on our speakers because we don't have extra subs, and then vibraphone and no real like bass range. And so I wanted low toms and then adjusted the high toms to match. So it sounds pretty blendy.
Yeah, I really like the two sets of toms, and we have a bunch of single-sided majestic, like a set of 8 majestic single-sided toms at my
Cool.
school. And I'm like, oh man, I would go to town, like having
Mhm.
the students pull all of them out and saying, okay, play this lick. Like, which ones do you like?
Mhm.
I think one of the things I really like about this piece is the content is so repetitive, as you had said, that there's like students can really think about like this, like get into the sounds they're making in
Mhm.
every single like one measure or two measure sequence, as well
Mhm.
as like you can really get into the weeds in like chamber music and communication, which is
Mhm.
something I struggle with like some accessible rap. I'm like, there's no need for them to ever look up from the stand because it's cut and dry where they are.
Mhm.
Whereas this requires, and your students were doing like a lot of communication of like, here's the next section because we've been going for a while. Like,
Mhm.
yeah. So
I have a question, but it's not really about the piece. You had like some cool lighting and stuff, and
Yeah.
you like decided on like the extra musical stuff going into that performance.
Yeah. So part of it is we have kind of 3 performance areas available in the school. We have the theater, which is like this big stage where the seating is lower than the stage, and so it's really hard to see what's happening. And it like sounds kind of bad in there. And then we have the chapel, which is not where you want to put Ethan Isaac's amplified drum set quartet. It is like hyper resonant and really small. Like we barely fit on that stage playing shared space or taxidermy, which we have done in there. And then the black box. And so part of it is like we are in a black box theater. I want it to feel like it's in the black box on purpose. Besides the fact that that's our best sound and visual space. But then also one of the people in percussion ensemble, and she was in drum set and percussion lessons, and now she's in comp lessons with me, but she's a theater tech major and is like the head carpenter at the school. And so I was just like, Julianne, can we do cool lighting on this? Like, I like the stuff you're doing for the dance program. Can we just do that? And she's like, yeah, tell me about all the pieces and I'll make all the cues and I'll clock in as working for the school. And so it's a really nice thing. And she's graduating and she had a co-lighting designer, Mateo, who's going to do our next concert. And then there's a sophomore bassoonist. I'm just like, next year, Mateo is going to be lighting designer and you're going to be assistant lighting designer. And you're going to do it when Mateo leaves and you're a senior. And so I've like started building this pipeline of lighting designers, which I think adds a ton to the experience, not just musically, but making people feel like they're coming to an event and not like they're coming to a school concert. Because I think necessarily like the percussion ensemble just does different things than the wind ensemble and orchestra and choir do, and I want to offer as much variety to the department as I can, because there aren't a ton of student recitals, and when they are, it's just like clarinet and piano and a flute for one piece, and it's like I kind of give them as much breadth of musical but like big picture musical experience as possible.
Yeah, I think there's like a level of production that comes into play there that's really refreshing. Yeah, the lighting. We went through something similar at Ohio State when we were in the pandemic. It was like, how do we make these like recordings of percussion ensemble pieces that we're doing because we can't give a concert? How do we make them like not look like they're filmed in our really shitty rehearsal room? And it was all about lighting. So it was like, bring your lamp, bring your rug, like create a vibe. Yeah, I really like that about the video and the presentation of the piece. Lewis, I have a question. Did you find that like there is there like quote unquote like melodic material in this? Like, to me, when I'm hearing this piece, I almost hear it's like drums and mallets are like very, very equal and not really there isn't necessarily melody. It's just about like interplay in a way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it's definitely more interplay than like vibes have the tune and drums are keeping a beat. There's a lot of interplay between the two drummers, and then Alex does this thing a lot where he'll hocket melodies. So like bottom of page 3 in the score is a good example where Glock and vibes are just playing like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1. Little things like that. Like when we get into Let Her Be, that first clip, it's very clearly like Glockenspiel is playing this arpeggiated melody and everybody else is taking the back seat.
Sorry, I just wanted to like find that.
Yeah.
See, so it was letter B, for instance.
Yeah, that. Like that whole thing we identified as a melody, and it's like, okay, vibes are doing 3 different things every bar where you're playing like a bass note, responding to the melody, and then filling out the sound.
Yeah.
It's like bass, melody, harmony, bass, melody, harmony, bass, melody, harmony every bar. And then when we get into letter D or so, I think. This is like a little vibe cadenza thing. And then at letter D, there's these melodic trade-offs between the tom players.
Yeah.
And the keyboards are really just static, like 4-bar chords.
Yeah, this piece fascinated me because it just does, I feel like what it's set out to do very well. I mean, like, there's no two ways around it, but like, I will definitely be programming this one in the fall, assuming I have 5 kids in percussion ensemble.
If you have 4, I will drive in and play a part.
But yeah, no, I really like it. And for, somebody who's also dealing with like kids that maybe have no or little experience in percussion ensemble or like aren't even percussionists, these are mallet parts that I know I can like give somebody and be like, guess what, you have X amount of measures to actually learn. And then it's just like really focusing on execution and making sure that you're like playing with the right sound in mind and like ensemble unity. So
yeah,
I dig it.
Yeah. Well, and what's nice too is like the person I had playing Glock was in my Theory 2 class. So he was like, I'm struggling to learn all of these notes at letter B. And I was like, what notes do you have in that first bar? What chord is that?
Yeah.
How is the melody moving? Like it is very chordular
Hmm.
and not in like a lot of it's just minor seventh chords.
Right.
So it does require a little bit of that theory foundation, but he was like had never played a keyboard percussion part, and
Right.
then doing that and the Glock part on shared space this semester. So
That's
like
great.
a lot of growth available just through that.
Yeah. I also love that this piece is 5 minutes long because every like so much accessible percussion ensemble repertoire
Like 2.5.
is like 2.5, and it makes programming just so like for a even for like what my kids end up doing, which is 15 to 20 minutes on a like collage concert. It's hard to even fill that up with the amount of rehearsal time you get because it's like everything that you guys are at the level to play is like 3 minutes long. Now I don't have time to do 6 pieces. you know. So yeah. Hey Hannah, welcome.
Hey, good to be back after not being here last meeting.
We were just talking about phases. Do you like have any like thoughts or questions about that chart?
I think like once
Not
we
to
get
put you on the
going, I
spot.
will.
Sorry.
Yeah, I was wondering, are we gonna be able to see the music at all or no?
Yeah,
Oh
so
yeah.
I have the score here. We've already listened to it and everything. But
Hmm.
yeah. So, but I can share the score with you if you like want to see any of it.
Yes.
Okay. Let me just I might pull the score up again, and since we had a couple people join late, do you guys just want to listen to maybe like a little bit more of this?
Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. So I'll play those 2 excerpts again that Lewis mentioned. And then the last one was like the last minute or so, right?
Yeah, like 4.5.
4.5. Got it. Yeah. I did just buy a drum machine at a garage sale also, so you know,
Shocking.
I'm so excited to program this in the fall. Hannah, here's that score. So the first video portion we listened to is at letter B here. Just so you can see some of that content. Yeah. And then the last bit was the drop here, so right before letter F or G, excuse me. Okay, so that gives you a little insight.
Cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the piece is interesting. I think it's fitting for like what you said before about it being a good length for the level. Yeah. I also think it's a good instrumentation. I think that's something else that we don't discuss enough is that a lot of times will write easy pieces. They'll call for a ton of players and a ton of different instruments. And like, if you're a small college, how are you supposed to play these works if you don't have 3 marimbas and 2 sets of 4 toms and 3 bass drums or whatever?
I was going on my soapbox about only having 1 5-octave again.
Yeah, and some schools don't even have a 5-octave, so there's that too.
Okay. Thank you, Lewis. Really appreciate you bringing this one to the table. And send Alex our thanks as well for writing it and sharing it. So
Will do. And to reiterate, the score is absolutely free. Just send me an email and I'll send you the Google Drive link.
do you have parts as well, or did you guys read from the score? Okay,
Mhm.
great.
Yeah.
Excellent. Love it. Also, side note, if we get accepted for PASIC, we should definitely put this on the program.
See, this is one that I have mixed feelings about because it does have the electronics,
True.
like accessible asterisk,
Right.
but
Accessible plus.
Oh, sorry.
in parentheses accessible.
I think it's actually really good at introducing that because it could be one of those gateway pieces where people see it in a context in like a really achievable context, and then it starts to become more it permeate, and then that other repertoire that use that excuse me is then kind of more because I really think it's more of a question of like people just haven't done it before, not that they can't do it. And this is like
Right.
the golden piece to like stab that problem at its heart.
Yeah, how difficult were the electronics?
It's really not too bad. I mean, the sample part comes in at the end only, and so I got to give that player like 3 weeks off of rehearsal as we chunked through the whole beginning, which he appreciated. And then we did it on like an 8x8 launch pad, so like truly finger drumming through it. But you could do it on a DTX, you could do it on a mallet station, you could frankly do it like on a computer keyboard if you practiced a little bit. I think the biggest challenge too is just finding a way for him to be able to practice the part because that launch pad lives in a locked cabinet. And so I think especially if it's like there's a studio instrument that you can use, or if they're going to do it on their personal computer or something, then it's very achievable because it's just a matter of like moving your fingers in time.
Awesome. Okay, so we got 3 more charts to talk about. Do we want to explore some early marimba repertoire, some solo chimes, or vibraphone duet?
I like that chime piece.
Me too. Hannah, so did you find this piece, or was this Graham sent this in to you?
So Graham sent this to me a while ago because of the other piece I shared on here that was the solo chime piece.
Fear of Music.
Yeah, it's like Fear
Yeah.
of Bowed Bells or something like that. Yeah. And so he sent the piece to me and said, "Hey, you like chime solos. You should look at this one." And so I watched it and obviously I liked it. So I thought that it would be a good piece to submit for us to discuss today.
Yeah.
And we also have the composer on the call, which is really cool. Thank you for being here.
Oh, glad to be here. Also, Graham told me about this as well. So, yeah,
Oh, great.
props to him.
Well, would you like to introduce yourself and the piece? Like, tell us a little bit about it. I have the YouTube video pulled up, so we can listen to. It's only about 3 minutes
Yeah.
and some change, so we can listen to most of it, if not all of it. But yeah,
Yeah, I mean, sure. Well, first of all, yeah, I'm Tomasz. I'm from Poland, and actually, I know Jacob out of everyone here. Hey. Yeah, so mostly I'm a yeah, of course, like I'm a percussionist doing my master's finishing this year. I did some studies in Stuttgart, in Amsterdam, but mostly in Poland, and that's where I'm currently at. And this piece was, first of all, it was written for my friend for her bachelor's recital, but then she couldn't make that work in time, so it was laying in my computer, actually not in my desk, for quite some time. But then when I was in Amsterdam on my Erasmus, my friend was looking for a short piece for multi-percussion, and I showed it to her. And that's how it got premiered. And I asked her to make a recording of it later. And this is what we did. That was one of the things I did on my exchange. And about the piece in general, maybe after I would listen to what you guys have to say. Maybe I can then hop in with some ideas and insights.
Yeah. Shall we listen? Let's do it. All right. And how do you pronounce the title? Do you mind me asking?
Oh, I have to think of this again.
Yep.
Since I wasn't looking at that one for quite some time. It's pronounced na pewno.
Not Pevno. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The translation is for sure. Dot or question mark.
Got it. Well, let's go ahead and take a listen. Nice. I will just say the patting on top of the chimes is something like I've just always done ever since I was in middle school. And I've been waiting to hear that like in the context of a piece. And I don't think it was in the Lee Hinkle chart that we looked at before, but I'm like, I heard that and I was like, yes, finally somebody did this. So yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
And in the end, it appears that not every chimes have those holes, like, so that was a problem apparently, like coming from Katowice, or where we have like two sets of chimes, both of them just look like this. I never realized I could look for something else, and we go to CVA and we have to look for right chimes, but we managed.
Yeah, I just love all the uses of the extended techniques, and I feel like they're used, like listening to this piece again, I feel like I got a better sense of like the extended techniques really go with the track very well. And they're not just there for like color or show, like they are actually doing something and like dialoguing with the track, which I really appreciate.
Yeah, there's that moment with like playing on the frame of the chimes that fades away and it's still there in the track, and that's the moment that really sold me on the piece. That I went from like, okay, I'm listening to this is cool, to like, oh, this is a good piece. Like, this is awesome. I like this.
And like, I feel like I wasn't here for the last chime piece discussion, but a lot of times, maybe it's already talked about, but like a lot of times, like chime music doesn't necessarily have the hottest like return on investment, kind of like it's not always the most satisfying thing. And this just felt like really elevated. It felt like the sonic palette just made a lot of sense. Like programmatically, it felt very like adventurous, and I liked it a lot. So
Yeah, like I would wheel out the chimes and set up a bass drum and the electronics for this piece.
yeah, this piece is worth moving a set of chimes. Like
So glad
Yeah,
to hear that.
the frame sound was literally like, so I got hype about patting the tubes at the end, but like honestly just playing the frame with the brush, I was like, that's the kind of sound that like did you indicate that initially, or was that something you guys kind of discovered in the like working through the performance and recording?
Well, no, I must say that if we're talking about the sonic aspects, Bea and actually Arnold Marinissen, who was our teacher at that time of multi-percussion, they came up with adding, for example, the, how do you call it? Drum break, the metal break thing. I don't remember the English name of that. And so they extended some metal aspects, and they came up with the amount of like they added some some metals into the mix. But about the hitting the box, that was from the beginning. That was one of the ideas of mine that I got from experimenting myself with brushes on chimes. Honestly, like with the sounds there was just one or two things that I discovered that were new to me. That was one of those, and the other one is played at the end, but maybe it's not really audible that much. Like, you can play almost like overtones. You got this whistling noise if you hit chime more into the middle with a harder mallet, and that's what I used for like few hits in the end. But other than that, oh yeah, heads, of course, that's our childhood going out. But other than that, I really tried to make it cohesive with the tape, with and with the idea of the whole piece. Like, for sure was written during the time when we had not sure if any of you know, but for quite a few years back we had a lot of big movements for women's rights, like the black people were going out on the streets for weeks and for everything. And actually in that tape I have snooped in some recordings of audio from that thing, and for sure was way for me to just maybe ask myself and assure that maybe it will be better, or will it be better, you know? So that's what this piece was mostly about. Funny enough, actually, now that I think about this, first two people that first person that premiered it and people that it was written for, they are girls. So that's something that just relates now. Yeah, I
Could
think
you talk
that's
a little bit
mostly all.
about the electronics, about the aspect and what either software you used or how
Oh
that
yeah,
process
sure.
looked? Because I find that kind of daunting with working with composers or commissioning, trying to make something that sounds that blends well and not being the most well versed in like different softwares and DAWs and things like that.
Oh heck yeah, yeah. That was also time consuming. So yeah, and a lot of energy went into it. So yeah, first of all of the sounds I made from scratch because I was especially at that time I was experimenting a lot with VCV rack. So I could make every sound from scratch, and that was still electronics. And then I just recorded it into Reaper, and everything was done in there. The most of the track is actually cohesive and coherent in the electronic sounds because I based it on 2 or 3 longer improvisation sections that I did in VCV Rack, and then I cut it and then process it in Reaper. So I didn't add any VST sounds, maybe like echo or whatever, but I really tried to do something to avoid something that annoys me in other electronics with percussion, which is because we have all the possibilities, we use most of it, which is not always preferable. And with chimes at the heart of this piece, I got chimes take care of very interesting ratio of sounds, like the top, but actually they come into the middle as well. So I could really focus in electronics on the bass and on the choppy tops. And that helped me a lot. That with this setup, I got everything else taken care of. Cool. So nice that you brought this piece. It's a pleasure.
Yeah. Where do we get the score? And also, have you written other percussion pieces? I saw your marimba solo on Musicon.
A vibraphone solo, yes. Well, honestly, yeah, that's the only other one that's published, and sometimes I write, but I haven't really got into publishing for now. I try to end my studies, last year of masters. About the piece, hit me up. Like I haven't really gotten into even writing a performance notes for that piece, so I couldn't even put it anywhere because I knew that I have to sit down and write that down, and I never got time to do it. So if anyone is interested, just hit me up, socials or whatever. I can share my mail later or something. But yeah, I think it's gonna be published someday.
Yeah, can you just like put if we wanted to contact you, how we could do that in the chat?
Sure. Let me just bring that up. Yeah, I think email will be the best one.
Nope. Somebody needs to propose to PAS that they do a focus day that's just compositions for orchestral chimes for the new music research. Because
Yeah.
honestly, like that'd be the hypest thing ever.
Right? I
Yeah.
mean,
Or-
the instrument itself, it looks so cool.
Yeah.
Or someone needs to do this at the Seamus conference.
What is that?
The Society for Electroacoustic Music in the United States.
Oh, okay.
SEAMUS, big like electroacoustic conference.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
Nice. So,
Yeah.
any last questions, or maybe I mean, it's a short piece. How long can we talk about this?
Oh, there's one thing we didn't talk about that was kind of like a earlier we were talking about the lighting that Lewis used in the High Point video, but I really like the video production quality. And at one point I was like, my eyes are just like, I'm tired. So when I saw the ceiling tiles, like, or the fluorescent lights like pulsating, I was like, whoa, like that's a really, and with the track, I was like, wow. And I think I saw in the YouTube credits, like, did you do all the videography for this too?
Yeah. I mean, I'm the one that's I have a strong idea, and in the end, it means that either I would have to put a lot of money into this, or I just do it myself, because
Yeah.
I have, thankfully, and also because of the pandemic, I have a lot of different possibilities right now, also in terms of video editing and stuff and mastering. So yeah, I did everything for this one myself. And because I recorded it with my phone, I knew that I have to do some heavy video editing, so you don't focus on the raw video itself. And it was you discussed it when I came in. How do you make something that's recorded in the percussion studio room look nice? Just like magic tricks. Don't look at the room, look at this, look at this, look at this.
Right.
It took a lot of time, but yeah, I'm very very happy about this one. And all of my videos actually I did myself, and that's a cool thing to learn, but I can understand that not everyone wants to. So
I want to learn. I just am. I just have not done it yet. So no, I was like, wow, the production side of like the video, it was very awesome. So I admire you for doing that too. Yeah. Let's see. I feel like I have one other comment here. Oh, one last question. So the brushes, as well as like the playing on the tops, sonically, like have you seen this performed live, as far as like in a recital hall or anything? Would those effects do they translate well in a bigger space, or is it kind of a challenge to balance?
It is actually hitting on the box, not really, because it's very loud, but hitting chimes with brushes itself, it is a bit of a challenge. I haven't heard it in a big hall though, only from what I've heard from the recital. But I know that it's been performed with a kind of nice success. Like my friend later, when I left CVA back to Poland, he done it on his recital, and he managed to do everything. So it's just a matter of just trying and having someone in the audience to really shout at you, like you have to be quieter or louder or whatever. Like, you practiced it, come on, let them hear that. But other than that, honestly, the sounds of, I would call them plucking, like the hands on the top. This one is quite loud, but maybe in the bigger hall, the pitches are getting a little lost. It all depends on the chimes that you have, and it's not like some are better, some are worse. It's just so different that it's crazy.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for eliminating all that. That's great. Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. Are you on our mailing list, by the way? We could totally add you. So if you ever want to join,
I would love to. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. Sweet. Cool. Any other thoughts? Great. Well, thank you again. It's been a pleasure, and let's keep going, I guess. So do we want to talk about a possible alternative to the Mark Ford book? Jacob, you're not at UNT, are you, right now? He's not lurking in the background. Oh,
No, I am definitely in my recital room at the University of North Texas. But no, feel free. Keep going.
Did I say alternative? I mean companion. Um,
No, you mean all.
Companion to the companion, because he's got two now.
wait, he has two. Oh, that's right, he does. I don't know the second one. I haven't used it at all. But do you guys want to talk about that?
Hashtag marimba baby.
That's it. That's it. So I guess like I'll launch into the Bozeman book because it's like I've really enjoyed using it lately. Have any of you guys? So how many of you learned for Mallet Marimba using the Ford book at some point? Mark Ford book. Any like what else? Like
Not me, since I'm not on the video.
gotcha. What like I guess the alternatives to that are like you just learn out of the Stevens book or like the Zeltzman book or because
Or no book.
or no book. Yeah, you just learn.
Learn it on the street.
Particulars.
Learned on the street. Yeah, so something like I've kind of struggled with is finding repertoire that bridges between like Mark Ford etudes and like I'll just say Yellow After the Rain because that's like the first or now I guess the Adam Hopper Ghost Garden. Like where is the piece that's in between that's like longer than a Ford etude? Because the Ford book is it's mostly etudes, right? Have any of you heard of this Mark Bozeman Mallets and Music book? So Mark Bozeman teaches at I think Texas A&M International University. He sorry. And he is like he's got the like really wild Bach videos and all of the John Sari West Side Story suite. Like the guy is just a monster at marimba. And he's good at other things too, but he's like kind of made his performance career, it seems like, out of like being a marimba player. And from what I understand, Mallets and music, not to be confused with Mallets and Manuscripts, kind of stemmed out of he wanted like another resource for younger marimba players. So he commissioned a ton of people to write these like solos. So there's it's spread out into two different parts. There's like book one music and book two music. It's all in one book. But composers for that include Mike Burritt, Ivan Trevino, Blake Tyson, Baljinder Sekhan is in there. Who's the guy that Robert Hanstein actually? So like these guys that we typically would associate with more advanced level marimba repertoire wrote easier pieces, shorter pieces, like around the 3-minute range, I would say. And I've taught a couple of them to some of my students, and I really like them. But yeah, just kind of a resource that I think has gone a little bit under the radar. It came out in I think like 2016. So it's been out for a while, maybe even a little bit earlier than that even. But I remember a friend being excited about it at PASIC back in 2016 and grabbing a copy, and no one has used it. So I sent you guys the whole playlist that Bozeman has. So he plays through every single solo and then gives tips and walks through some of the exercises that he would use. The book has exercises in it. It has QR codes that lead to every single video and companion video. So it's a really well thought out resource for sort of like beginner formal playing. The first etude or solo out of the book is by Drew Warden, who's like one of Ivan's buddies, kind of that same Eastman gang. Sorry, my cat is going crazy behind me, so you might hear screaming at some point. So let's listen to this one. This is Bobo by Drew Warden. Yeah, so then he would go into his sort of spiel. I'll play like one more of these. I've got a few of them pulled up. Here's the Jennifer Bellor Afterglow. So a little more advanced with the independent roles. Yeah, so this one being from the second half of the book, I think they're more intended to be kind of like what the last couple of pieces in the Ford book are like, where they're sort of combinations of everything you've learned so far. And they're quite a bit more advanced. The last one I'll show you guys, this is the Mike Burritt one. Of course, it's going to play an ad.
Finding a new
Bear with me.
career can be an exciting and eye-opening experience.
This one's pretty fun. It's fast. I'm going to stop it there because it's pretty much the same thing after that point with a little corral in the middle. But again, even that piece I think is kind of indicative of like Mark Bozeman's like, cool, you don't have to play velocities or rhythmic caprice or whatever the Zivkovich piece is that uses the shafts of the mallets. I think there's one of those. You don't have to play a piece like that. You can play this Mike Burritt piece that's like way easier to get that sort of shaft sound or anything like that. So lots of solos in the book, which is great. You know, a variety of voices, which never hurts. But I definitely think it is like some of the solos are like a little bit harder than the Ford book, sort of the back of the Ford book, which is why I think they kind of work better in tandem together, because you can start with Fry and then move into Bobo or whatever and go from there, kind of pick and choose. But yeah, any thoughts on this as folks that are teaching or have like played some introductory rap?
You go first.
I like kind of like you said, like the breadth and the depth of composers commissioned for this, whereas like kind of the Ford book, you get Mark Ford. With this, you get a lot of yeah. With this book, you get a lot of composers who have written some like pretty heavy reps, so it feels a really good transitional kind of launch point too, for like if you have a student in their sophomore year play some of these pieces, and then maybe in their junior year they have to start programming a recital. It's like, well, some composers are right here in this book. Like these people have written some really great works. Like it feels like a really good like launch point for finding other repertoire as well for students who are just newer to that. So
Yeah, I have two things. To add to our list of books that are like the Ford book but aren't. There's the Dave Skidmore Fresh Approach and the Julia Gaines Sequential Studies for Mallet Marimba. I've played out of both, and I don't use any of them like as my book. And to be like completely candid, there's things I like found the gains on my iPad, and I found things that I highlighted that I was like eyebrows up a little bit. Like there's a spot that says independent grip is popular in the US and cross grip is popular in Asia and Europe. And I feel like there are more continents than 2.5 of them. But little things like that. I feel like in terms of the rep, this almost feels like one entire stage lower than the Zeltzman intermediate masterworks for marimba, because it's intermediate but like super advanced, and I feel like this one is like beginner and it's intermediate. And then the thing that I appreciate the variety of composers represented, but I also feel like it can be such a grab bag of what you get. And I don't have an end to this statement. Like this is not I'm not declaring anything, but I do feel like percussionists have a weird relationship with etudes, where we have a lot of exercises and then we write etudes with the techniques that go so far out of the technique that you're not working on the technique anymore. You're working on like having your hands spread super far, because that's the composer's musically interesting way to do double verticals. And so Mike Compitello writes and talks a lot about this, and I've been on like listening to his podcast with Mike Truesdell a lot lately. And so like from a cognitive standpoint, it is scientifically like better to work technique and then use repertoire that connects to it rather than learning through repertoire. So I think like any of these, the etudes have to be paired with technical work just for best results. So like not just doing Fry, but like playing scales with inner mallets and then connecting that to Fry, or like doing double verticals in scales and then connecting that to cane. But it's like all of those pieces have the spot where it breaks the pattern, and that's when it gets musically rewarding, but also at that point just like pick a piece. Like I like Michael Burritt's 5 preludes better than I like his etude, and I think that there is a prelude at a comparable level. Not to come out as like anti etude method book. I hate percussion pedagogy. I hate learning, but it's like I feel like there are good pieces for every level, and we could just identify those too.
Yeah, I agree. The biggest reason I latched onto this book is because, like, for me and what has been stressed to me in like formal pedagogy and like independent grip or cross grip, because I play both. Um, the like double vertical stroke is the easiest one to do, right? For any kind of grip. And like the Ford book does not start you with that. It starts you with single independent, which is like not easy. And this Bozeman book, Bobo, is mostly a double vertical etude. Like there is like the very opening line is single independent strokes, but from there it's all about bum, 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 and it's in quarter notes. So it's like finally there's an etude that I can give to a student, or a etude or solo, whatever you want to call it, that I can give to a student and say, look, this is going to take that first stroke that we've worked on in C major, and you're only going to play, or in F major, whatever, you're going to play those double vertical chords and this like chord progression that we might have worked on in the context of this piece. Yeah, because that double vertical is kind of like fundamental to everything else, right? Or we all would say that, and then we're like, okay, you're going to play Yellow After the Rain as your first thing that you're ever going to do in four mallets, and it's like, oh shit. Or Rain Dance, even, like, good god, it's too hard. Yeah,
I think an issue with some of the repertoire is maybe the amount of time some of it has been out. Like Velocities and some things have been written like in the 90s ish, early 2000s, and at least other instrumentalists have like extended technique method books or approaches. And so like to jump right into a piece and have the extended technique be in the solo without ever like having that kind of experience, I think is what makes it really hard, and honestly makes me quit a lot of like projects that I start. It's like, well, like this is going to take me a long time to do. I can't learn this in the semester because I've never played on the shafts or whatever with the shafts. So I thought that was really interesting. And then I think like each of these books that we discuss just kind of helps you teach, because each student learns in a different way. And so you have the more resources, the more time, the more people like you guys put out stuff or write etudes, or like it's going to help the student find different avenues to access the marimba, which can be pretty daunting at times.
yeah, and it's not just the marimba either, it's like snare drum, and we all have different experiences, and as an example, different feelings about portraits and rhythm, probably. I'm a portraits and rhythm hater, I'll be honest.
I
but
also hate that book.
it's so just ridiculous.
I think it also has to do with
Bob
just
Benson.
having to play every single one of those just really put a bad taste in my mouth.
Agreed. And all because somebody told you had to. The same person that made me play all of the surrounds that was also like in percussion pedagogy class and lit class, being like, we're talking about the issues within our like repertoire and like what our students or our prospective students need. Like, that's why you're going to write the next method book that fixes this. And I'm like, that's a lot of pressure to put on somebody. Like, first of all, but second of all, like, you're right. We are going to continue to contribute, and hopefully the gap becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, because we don't have that history of, we don't have a Suzuki method, for instance, as much as we like to think we do with things like Peters or stick control. Here's your first method book. Like, great. What do I do with this?
I think maybe the broader issue is thinking that a method book is going to solve our problems.
Mic drop. Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, and I think, just back to one of Jacob's points, like we have more tools in our toolbox, like by learning about all these different books. Like, I use Momentum now. I've mostly been using like the solos that are in the back of that, because I'm like, this is a great jury piece for two mallets for a freshman, a sophomore. Some of those like would be even higher level. But to be able to like not just be like, oh, two mallet solo, I don't know, Bach transcription, Haydn handle, like, no, anyway. Hannah, you were gonna say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say I don't know if this happens in all of the solos, but the second one you showed us, what I realized watching that for a second time, because I watched that one earlier, was that any time before there was a large interval change, it was written so that the other hand continued and this hand had a second to change. And I really appreciate that because a lot of our early rep just goes straight to octaves without any time for them to prep. And well, one, I think there's an issue with just going straight to octaves when you're starting. But if you're going to do that, you need to give them time so they can do it right and like get used to this is how it feels for my hand to change. And you can't do that in a second.
What if I told you I just worked on Bobo with a student on Wednesday who had barely practiced? He's never going to hear this recording, so I'll say that. And he like was literally just struggling, going ya da 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 bum, like playing the next chord and getting like the interval set. So like that's a real deal conversation with some guy who's literally just played Fry before this. So it's like cool. We have to work on like where's your landing point and what does it take? Giving like just don't play the chord yet. Just play bum 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 stop chord. Give yourself a second to make sure. Do I have it? Okay, now cut that second in half. Cut it in half again, over and over and over again. So I agree with you. Like that is something that students struggle with, and it's nice to have something pedagogically that seems to enforce that or reinforce that growth. So, yeah. Any other thoughts? I mean, if you guys ever want to check out the book, I'll send you like maybe a screen grab of like a couple of first pages and things like that. There's a lot of like writing within it, which is cool too. So
I have
Yeah,
a comment. Oh, sorry.
you can go ahead.
Okay. The teacher I studied with was kind of like old school. Like he came up in like more the like 70s, 80s kind of scene. And so like I could totally hear him having the opinion, not that this is like good or bad, but like, no man, you got to get into the hard rep because like it's like you got to start there so that way like you can just sort out all the stuff right away. But like, and I like personally coming from a situation where I think I played maybe he like gave me the Lee Howard Stevens book and was like, okay, figure yourself out. And then he gave me like is anyone who the Julia Davila book, the Impressions on Wood. He gave me that and we did that for a full semester, which was a lot because it was just like I was like, these aren't like that difficult. But it was good to touch on. And then he was like, all right, now play all the Smedbeck etudes. And I played all of them, but like not well. So like it's like that some people like relish that like huge jump and it's like hard to understand why. Like I don't get it.
I have two questions. One, did you play the crazy triple lateral Spanback etude that's like
Oh,
that?
yeah, that was my favorite one actually.
That's the only way I know how to describe that one. I remember watching that on Vic Firth and I was like, whoa, this is crazy.
It's too hard. Like
It's
that's
so
hard.
hard.
It's all like octaves, but the middle two mounts are always like overlap. I don't
Yeah.
know.
And then
Yeah.
the etude one has the really sick like down the keyboard lick that's like so hype visually.
Pedagogically difficult, but yeah.
Yeah, I low-key learned Smadbeck Etude 1 in like 2 days as a master's student and was like, this piece is dope. But my second question or my comment is yeah, I agree with you. Like there's an idea that is kind of not well suited to learning where you're like always climbing the next rung. There's also like people talk about this with career paths too all the time. So, but like you're always climbing the next rung when sometimes like life gets in the way or you hit a stumbling block and you've got to go one rung down. Now,
Yeah.
I think that like that is something that's kind of hard to grasp as a teacher. If I hand a kid Yellow After the Rain and like after 3 weeks they play it well, I'm like, cool, are you going to do whatever's next in the like sequence. Are you going to play Etude 1 by Smadbeck, or like do we need to evaluate and say, well, you really struggled with double verticals, so here's the offering because it's really, really easy and it's really thought-provoking musically and really different from Yellow After the Rain. So it's like there's almost a, okay, we're not taking a step, or we're maybe taking a step down. But I think there's a danger in that too. Like you might, Hannah, I remember countless times at Ohio State where like there was a kid that would play like Etude 1 by Smadbeck, and then the next semester I'm like, what are you working on? They're like, I'm doing Oakland by Mark Ford. And I'm like, why? Like you just played something that's like 4 times harder than that, you know? And then the progression like stops and they get stuck, you know? And that always frustrated me where I'm like, well, you could do something harder than that. But anyway, yeah.
Yeah, along those lines, I know like when I was an undergrad, we had Steve Schick come in, and he was there for the Big Ears Festival, and he, you know, is very much like kind of out of necessity. He had to learn the hardest stuff first, and there like wasn't intermediate multi, and so we all kind of got on this kick of like, oh yeah, we got to play the hardest stuff out there so that we can learn this stuff too. Kind of like you were saying, like your teacher did. And then the next year we were all kind of a mess because we were all playing like too much, too hard, too many items. No one, like logistics were a mess amongst the studio. And then the next like year we had to kind of like have like a little heart to heart of like, maybe we do like one challenging, like really challenging piece. And then the rest we kind of go back to like, yeah, just like gentle ladder progression instead of like, you don't need to be playing like velocities and like Persifasa as a sophomore. Like you're going to be missing a lot in the middle there that is going to actually help like your hands work correctly and you not be so like mentally taxed and stressed out when you have to do like theory 2.
Yeah, that's one of the things that like is really frustrating for me, that I'm seeing that like my students are starting to get ears for repertoire, and they're starting to like, I think I've pushed them down the YouTube radicalization window, that they're like, I saw Attraction by Emmanuel Sejourné come up. Like, can I play this next year? And it's like, you couldn't handle the marimba part or the vibe part for this John Mackey piece. So we're not going to give you the Sejourné, but we can start doing keyboard lessons and you can do scales with inner mallets. And I think that would help. But I think part of it too is like, they see a piece that they want to do and they get excited about it, and so they will put in time, versus like there's nothing fun and exciting about whatever X etude because they know it's an etude, and they didn't find out about it on YouTube. They found out about it from a book from me who's old, and so they just like, they don't care. And so I think part of it is just managing expectations. And like I was texting my student yesterday, I was like, here are the skills that you would need to put this piece on a recital later. Here's how we can build up each of those things. But also on the like very targeted etude thing, and on like starting with double verticals versus starting with laterals or alternating or independent strokes. One thing I really like is just taking something with a chorale shape, and like the first movement of Reveries by Joe Moore is a great one for this, because it's all the same sticking until the last 4 bars. It's like 1-4 to 2-3, just bum 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 bum, and both hands play a third, and it's just like parallel motion or like whatever the entire time. But we do it as double verticals to learn the notes and learn the chords, and then we do hands split and then rotating like in different directions and making etudes and warm-ups out of it, which I think builds flexibility and knowing what the music is, but also like they're getting this whole technique gauntlet and they think they're just like practicing this one piece. So I think there's something to be said too for like, instead of trying to like, because we did this at Commerce where it's like you cram an etude a week and you learn a new aspect of technique every week, versus like, we're going to take this and we're going to try it a million different ways. And then at the end of it, you're going to have a piece that you feel musically convinced about.
I think it'd be interesting to get insight, someone who is like truly a marimba soloist and like concerto player, and to see their ladder process. They're playing like a really high level, getting stuff commissioned for them now as like a full grown adult, probably gone through schooling, and to see like what their mental climb also has been. That stuff's crazy. If you've already played con velocities, bird variations, all these hard things, and you're maybe touring and playing, like, it always makes me wonder, that's such a difficult lifestyle in certain aspects. I'd be curious to see how that person went through their process.
Yeah, because we all have different opinions on like if you ever look at the Nancy Zeltzman list of recommended repertoire, like if you're anyone other than Nancy Zeltzman, chances are you're going to look at it and be like, don't agree, hard agree, yes, like love that. No, I don't agree. That's way too easy. That's way too hard. And like, yeah, I agree with you. It'd be fascinating to like we are all instructed to keep a repertoire list. And if you're like any of my teachers are like, I want you to put what semester you played, blah, 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 and like what concert you played it on. I'm like, oh my God. But if somebody who is like, if we'll just say his name, if Mark Ford gave us like his repertoire that he played from age infancy when he started playing marimba to like now, for instance, just as one example, like I do wonder, like, how does that shake out? And like, where do you see the run go like this versus climbing and climbing and climbing? Because I think at a certain point, as a marimba soloist or just a percussionist, like if you're performing recitals, you find the pieces that like speak to you, that you can execute, that like you enjoy, and you stop learning as many like new things because you have like the ones in your back pocket that you can play for a faculty recital every couple of years or whatever. But then it kind of goes to another thing that I believe in, which is, okay, you don't have to play all of the Vignale, you don't have to play all of the David Lang. Like, yeah, you should know it and maybe have played like one of them or not. Like if it's not your vibe, then like that's fine. Same with Xenakis, like, or Carter. Like, you don't need to play all 8 Carter Tiffany things. Really, you only need to probably play like 1 or 2, and you're good, because some of them are dumb, and there are dumb marimba solos out there too that like we don't have to push on people. One of the pieces I wanted to talk about today potentially was the Moi Ju, or however you pronounce it. I don't know this piece at all. And I like just remember seeing it like several years ago, just kind of pop up all over my Instagram, and it looked absolutely bonkers and hard. And I was like, whoa, how do people play this? And like, why? I just don't know. And like, I just don't know the piece well enough. So if you're a big fan, I'd love to hear someone's opinion on it sometime, but like, I just don't know it. So, but that's on me. Anyway, I'm rambling.
Yeah, and I mean, I'll be really quick. The other weird thing about it too is it's really easy to look at marimba solo progression in the repertoire, and it's like, maybe you did have to play the John Mackey vibe part, and that kicked your ass. Maybe you were in marching band and you had a lot of 4-mallet, just like technique work every day, and that's everything you were doing. So I think like remembering to take into account the other things that happen besides the marimba solos one after another, because I played like, I don't know, probably Yellow After the Rain, and then Michi, and then Dream of the Cherry Blossoms, which sounds like huge jumps, but there was also like 8 hours a day of marimba technique happening in the middle there, and like DCI marching band happening.
Yeah,
Okay.
and percussion ensemble too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, what I was going to say is, so we talked a lot about technique in developing our playing, but we haven't talked at all about the mental side of developing your playing. And I feel like that is something that I think kind of goes back to why it might be good to like not take 3 steps down the ladder, but maybe like a step down the ladder, is so that like you can take a second to not focus on technique and focus on like, am I phrasing this correctly? Am I having my musical ideas come across? Because like as an educator, we're not just trying to create these people that got chops. Like we want to create musicians. Yeah.
I actually do have a comment about that because when we were at SOCI in the ye old days, which feels like they were forever ago now, I know it's only it feels like a lot. Alex Bro, I don't know if anyone knows who that is here. Braud. Some people know him, some people don't. He was there, and I remember a conversation we had before, like in the early morning, we were drinking like black coffee before we were going in, and he was like, "Yeah, I don't understand like why we have to learn marimba, like why that's such like a cornerstone of what we do." Because he's like, I spent like 2 to 3 years on like a lot of it, but then like all the jobs are like orchestral jobs and stuff like that. And then I made the argument that I was like, well, it's like a really great workspace for like musical voice and interpretation and development, which I feel like informs everything else. But like in that like specific sense, I didn't know if like, because he's right, there's not like marimba soloist jobs everywhere, like there's like orchestral jobs. And so then I kind of am interested for people's takes on like why this is such like a thing that's going into perpetuity. And I think it's worth it, but we all agree that it's like worth it. Like, yeah.
No, I would say that your answer is correct. Like that's, or at least that's the answer I give when, because like a lot of my students come in, and they have like really only drum set experience, or like that's what their main thing is, and they're like, I've had one person be like, why do I have to learn this? And I was like, well, when I ask you to like listen to a piece of music and like understand like a phrase, you have kind of a hard time with that. So like this is a way that I can like help you with like understanding how a phrase works or how to phrase. So it is like a good vehicle for musicianship, but I think there is a point where like, especially if someone's goal in life is to perform, we have to abandon, and this is the other thing that we like to say is, well, I just want to, and I say this, I'm guilty of it, I just want to make sure you're a well-rounded percussionist. It's like, well, what the hell does that mean? Like, like you get to a certain point where you have a career and it's like, cool, if you want to be a drum set player, like you don't need to play marimba beyond like, I don't know, like it'd be great if you could like play an Abe etude or Abe etude, Abe piece, like or something like that. Yeah, not an etude. But like the example I give for that is do you guys know Rich Redmond? He's a drum set player. He used to play for, I don't know if he still plays for Jason Aldean, but fuck Jason Aldean. Um sorry. But I picked him up from an airport for a South Carolina Day of Percussion, and he was like, oh, like, yeah, man, I think he went to North Texas. And he was like, yeah, I think he has a master's in music ed maybe, but he like played like a full percussion recital and like played Dream of the Cherry Blossoms and shit. And he makes his living as like a country drummer. And props to him. But there's like a point where if your like artistic vision for yourself as a performer doesn't align with like being a marimba player, at least not like full time, it's like, cool, maybe your teacher or whoever you're working with should recognize that and be like, cool, you don't have to play marimba. Like, I don't know. I would like to think I would be okay with that, especially if they have hit like a certain benchmark. Like you have technique, you have facility. I can trust that if you got an orchestral gig, you could play your four mallet part as long as it's not bonkers crazy. But it's like you understand the process and the technical side of it. If all you want to do now is like focus on drum set and like orchestral excerpts because you want to be in a military band, let's do it. Sorry, long answer.
Yeah, I mean, I think marimba is one of the instruments that best lets us relate to other musicians, in especially like a classical school or department of music type of vibe. And it's the thing that makes percussionists pass theory 1 through 4, is like understanding that you can look at at like a German augmented chord. I don't know what those are, but you could look at one and play it on a marimba and then see the resolution and be like, okay, I understand how this works better than you can if you play flute or clarinet or something. Like it just lays out horizontally to vertically. But I think also it is, it's one of those balancing acts between you want to give the student the experience that they can have from school while they're in school, because a lot of people that we graduate at High Point University are not going into master's programs or going into music jobs. They are a music minor so that they can have a good time and supplement their studies in like media production. And so they're not going to have a marimba at their house, but they do want to play marimba while they have it. It's the same way that I felt like going into my last master's recital. I was like, I'm doing big setup multi and marimba quartet and blah, 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 because I won't have this as soon as I leave this building. But then there's also just the like, how much priority do we put on marimba is most like piano. So it is most capital G good at music. So I think there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah, if I could scoop in for a moment. Yeah, I've been listening for a few things that's been talked now. Also, going back a little to something that Hannah mentioned, like not only in terms of just teaching and how it all works, there's also a very, very important aspect, at least it was for me when I'm looking back at my music school time, and what helped me develop as a musician mostly, the music theory, lessons. Back in my school, I had not only like music history, and school, I mean before the university level, but we had a lot of not only solfege, but music theory stuff, the analysis of the music form. That was a separate thing. And that helped me a lot to develop and to understand what I'm playing and to just be faster. We all know how important or how useful it is to practice in your own head, right? And to have an idea of the musical piece of what you want to say and how you want to say and how composers wanted to send through a certain idea or feel or whatever. So this thing also I feel is very important for especially young musicians that are developing to know how well they know what they're doing in a very simple way to put it. Next thing that I'm always very curious, because I know that music teaching, especially in US, is very different than Polish. But marimba, yes. But for example, in Poland, we always play the same amount of vibraphone as a marimba. At least that's the basics, and maybe not for the recitals, because that's where you want to program whatever you want. Mostly, I mean, it should be diverse, but for every semester exams, we have like one marimba and one vibraphone, unless you really don't have time. But for the high school and before, like the middle school, you should play one piece for vibraphone, one piece for marimba, and that's where all of the easy jazz influenced pieces for mallets come in to get that gap between different pieces. Then you have a different gap where you have a lot of like semi-hard marimba pieces, but it's very hard in the vibraphone department, where you have jumped from David Friedman's pieces to Stockhausen, Vibraelufa, and all of those. So we have a lot of room for improvement everywhere. But focusing on giving them young students some mallets is very crucial for what you, Joseph, said, like the understanding of a musical phrase. And I know a lot of percussionists. Like we have a very nice example in Poland. There's this young percussionist, Jan Pieniążek. He won Young Musician of the Year. We have this in Poland like every 2 years or something. It's for the whole Europe. And basically you just take all like 5 or 6 of the most promising instrumentalists in Poland, and it's every instrument, and he was the first one to win as a percussionist. He's also a student of my teacher. And now he's a jazz drummer, and the way he plays drums is just outstanding, and the musicality is incredible. And for sure, it's everything translates to everything else. That's also what my teacher was talking with me when he was really trying. Now I love timpani, but in the beginning it was so freaking harsh, you know. But to understand the tone, the aspect of listening, I think this is one of the nicest things we have about percussion, that we can really go from one instrument to another to learn how to listen for certain aspects. You know, we go to snare drum and there's no easy pace on rhythm, where on marimba or vibraphone you can make it more mellow and it will pass through. It's not just it's not gonna work. On timps you have really big focus on articulation, and every hit is basically different. And when you get young students to hear that, it's so valuable, because if you can show them to take this to different instruments, it can speed up the process of just becoming a musician and having fun in working on stuff and having more goals than just right tempo, right notes, right?
Joseph, I saw you.
Oh, I
nodding.
was just gonna say I am glad they got confirmation that the folks in Europe study vibraphone more, or just more than we do in the US in terms of like solo repertoire or jazz, because it's, you know, one of my teachers played a lot of vibraphone and was like, I will gladly work with you on vibes in any context, whether it's solo repertoire or improvisation. And then I had another teacher who she could play vibraphone, but she was like, I just don't really know how to teach this instrument. Like, I don't get it, you know, and like was very candid about it. So, yeah.
Also, I think it's important. Yeah, go on. Sorry.
Oh, you got it.
No, just to comment on this one thing from Joseph. This is something that I've been trying to push on, and in Europe for sure it happened already, but it's going very slow. Since we're in the classical music realm, like, it's nice that all the vibraphones are playing jazz, but for example, I did it for like the middle school and all, but I'm really glad that now I can just do like the classical vibraphone, and to not forget that, this is the root of the vibraphone, but we already have a lot of great solo pieces, and we could just get someone to the level of marimba playing only on vibraphone in only classical context, which is hard, of course, because you have to look for the pieces yourself. But I think it's important to know that we're already at that state that it is possible, right?
Yeah, I just played do you know Argoro 7 by Alvin Singleton? Anybody familiar with this piece? I just played that on a faculty recital here, and it was for Black History Month, and Alvin Singleton's Black composer. So I was like, I want to program this piece. I think it's cool. But also to like give context to the vibraphone as like having a history steeped in jazz and in like Black music making was cool for the recital, but also to say, hey, the vibraphone is at a different point now, or is at multiple points now, right? Because you still have jazz musicians that are pushing that envelope. But I agree with you. It's nice that like, and there are folks in the US that are pushing the classical vibraphone repertoire, like the Vibraphone Project folks. I don't know how much they were at PASIC, talked to them a little bit, but yeah. Lewis, don't you have some affiliation with them, or did you write a piece for them?
I wrote a vibe solo that actually Mariusz Mokarski, who teaches at the Chopin Institute, premiered, but it's for prepared vibraphone, and so it was selected for their kind of broader call for scores. I was just gonna say, I noticed Joseph maybe laughing and nodding along when Tomas said something about like, yeah, like you can just play whatever you want on your recital, and I was like, we don't have that here. Like there's this aspect of having to check a box and playing a little bit of marimba, half your recital, a little bit of marimba, and a little bit of multi-percussion and timpani and a chamber work. And so I think it's interesting to have that concept of shaping your musical identity and your voice and presenting what your solo recital would be as compared to like, it's the end of your percussion degree, you need to play every percussion.
Yeah, well, I should be more clear. We have for masters we have 2 recitals, so they're separated by 4 or 5, 1 semester and second semester, and the way we do it is that we have, of course, like multi-percussion is always as well there. But other than that, you can really scoop in what you want, if you want timpani or not. And if you don't want to play something on the big one on the end, you would just play something easy on that instrument on the first one. That's why I told it in that way. Yeah, but I can see how different it is.
That makes sense. I feel like we had a really generous teacher in the way that Dave Hall let us program recitals, which like my last master's recital, especially because it was spring 2020, was only solo steel pan. But I think that was also just a product of circumstance. I have to go really quick, but I'm going to leave one thought and then run. Mike Compitello and Mike Truesdell talking about this. Timpani rather than marimba being the instrument that lets us talk to other instrumentalists because we have composers in common with them. Like the average flutist or violinist off of the campus of University of North Texas might not, like Mark Ford might not be a household name to them, but if we talk about Beethoven excerpts or if we talk about Bartok, even like that's going to be more relatable. And so I liked what Tomas was saying about like the tone being fundamental and it being a fundamental way to listen, but also just from a rep standpoint. I have a 30-minute drive to a lesson in 40 minutes, so I'm going to go. But bye. So good to see you all. Tomas, nice to meet you.
Pleasure to meet you.
Bye, Lewis. Bye, Alex. Yeah. Wow, this took a wild turn from the Bozeman book, and I absolutely love it. So, cool. Well, we still have the Sarah Henny's piece to talk about. I won't make you listen to all 12 minutes of it. Did you guys get a chance to listen to this duet a little bit? Yeah, so I encountered Sarah Henny's music in 2019 when I was taking a class at Ohio State called Music and Queer Desire. Just because it was a musicology class that I was like, this just sounds fascinating. Like I haven't taken a women and gender studies like course ever at that point. So I kind of jumped at the chance to take that along with like the intersection of that and music. And I kind of just went on a rabbit hole of like, cool, I've really only played music by white men, and I really need to like reflect on that and like try to find as many different voices as I can to just better educate myself. Sarah Henny's was one of the people I found as a result of that class. She teaches at Bard College, I believe now, full time. Yeah, she's killer composer, plays in the Meridian Trio with Greg Stewart, shout out South Carolina, and oh my gosh, Tim Feeney, I think. Sounds about right. Who teaches at Cal Arts. So Sarah Henny's, if you have like a spare, I think like $5, $10, $15, wrote an entire or created a documentary called Contralto It's a fascinating watch where I think she created all the footage and wrote the original score and recorded it with Meridian Trio. And it's centered around like a group of transgender women and them working through like vocal exercises and talking about like I think there's some like dialogue about their experiences as trans women as well. Sarah Henney's being a trans woman. So it's a really cool documentary. The music is awesome. So if you have time and a little bit of spare change, you should go and watch that. I think you can watch it on her website. But she's giving a guest lecture in South Carolina this week. So she was on my mind. And I found this duet called Settle for 2 players on 1 vibraphone. So let's just listen to a little bit of this. I'm going to jump around because it's pretty repetitive.
Quickly, I'll just scoop in because I also have to go. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure.
Oh, it was a pleasure having you and for you sharing your music with us, Tomas. And we hope you'll join us like as many times as you can. And if not, like just please keep in touch. So
yeah, of course. It's a great thing you're doing. It's fun.
Yeah. All right. See you later.
Take care.
Yep. Okay, so let's go back to this. Skip ahead a little bit here. Oh, come on. It's the worst timing for an ad. So I think from this, even just this excerpt, you get the gist of the piece. Do you guys have any like initial impressions?
I think for me, this kind of music, it takes the first initial response that I have to understand, like, okay, this is what it is, and then to kind of not shift my mind, but to kind of approach it in a different way. Because sometimes you see like 2 people on one vibraphone, like, oh, they're going to split something, and it's going to be this that everyone else already has written out and has portrayed, or it's going to use like different kind of like note, sustain, and duration because there's a pedal. And so some of these pieces that require almost like a more meditative state to kind of really get the concept of what is happening. It takes me a second, at least, like accessing that kind of listening. So I really appreciate that in this kind of music for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember kind of going off that when I first was introduced to this piece, which was 2 years ago at Soci.
Oh,
I did not like it because I just think for where I was at the time, I didn't get it yet. And now, just like with the experiences I've had since then, I think that I don't really know if like a recorded version, I think really portrays what this piece is about. I feel like it's more about like in the moment and being able to hear the intricacies of like the beating and things that are happening that just microphones don't always catch beating, especially if it's at a softer like level. And so I feel like if you were in the room, this piece would be very effective.
Yeah, this is like we talked about the Psalms that she wrote a couple months ago, and I looked those up since then, and also know that they've played Alvin Lucier, which is a huge influence on them, and that composer is like so at the forefront of the type of where it's like sound acoustic like art, like uncovering like small physical imperfections in the sound or in the something that seems really simple on the page, like playing a bunch of eighth notes in a row for a long time, has these subtle like imperfections that affect the supposedly abstractly perfect sound that's supposed to be happening. But yeah, it's one of those things where it's like it takes like you have to get used to it, or at least know like where they're coming from to like really appreciate like why someone would do this and why people would play it and why it's important to at least like appreciate.
yeah. And I think along those lines, like understanding that Sarah's music is like very concerned with space, not even just like the imperfections in like how the sound is produced or like the instrument that's producing it, but the how the space imparts or impacts the sound to the listener. And again, I agree with like I used this recording because I was like, okay, it's produced, so it's going to be like perfect in some way, but also I was like, let's just see how this sounds. Um, and I've like toyed with programming a couple of her pieces, either like in a solo program I was going to do, or actually this semester with my percussion ensemble students. And my students asked me, we were doing lives too, which is for like a variable amount of people playing like resonating keyboard instruments. Everybody has their own part, and it's anywhere from like 15 to 30 minutes long. And my students were like, "Oh, are we going to record this at the end of the semester?" And I was like, "No," because like capturing something like this is not. It's meant to be like almost like an experience versus a uh like a piece in some ways. It's almost like an art installation in a way. Um, but I kind of like the point. I hadn't thought about the point of like two people are walking up to a vibraphone. Like I know what this is going to be, and like the subversion of your expectations, which is like, and I won't put this like as part of like what Sarah does, but like in my class that I took, for instance, like we talked about like the idea of like queering music is like subverting like your musical expectation in a way. Um, so like your expectation of like again a vibraphone, two people playing on either side, or is it going to be, you know, yeah, Jose before John 5, but for vibraphone, or
Table
is it
talk.
good, or table talk, or 2+1? It's like, no, it's none of those. It's pedal is down. We're just playing a chord and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Any other thoughts or things? I have more, but I want to hear from y'all.
I found it really interesting. So before Tomas left the the discussion, that I know, I'm sorry. That at least, so I'm not a Texas native. I'm from Kansas City. I'm from the Midwest, and so I'm at school right now in UNT. And coming down here was a huge culture shift, and a lot of people that are Texas natives don't really understand that. And it's like, well, what do you mean? Like they grew up in the drum corps tradition and the drumming thing, or like some like marimba approaches in this region of the country and different things like that. But when we did a recent like performance in in Poland, and I actually ran into Tomas, he came and watched us play, but there was a vibraphone competition and a marimba competition at that institute, and so it's cool to see a lot of people getting composers commission them vibraphone solos, or this like creative pipeline or process where they're actually having like the equivalent of like a Great Plains or something like that, but it's like churning out these vibraphone works, and it's some really interesting stuff that I didn't even realize. And then even like a different approach to that is like the rudimental thing is super serious in Texas. Like the drum corps thing is like a big part of how people learn how to play music in the South. And so a lot of these people come out of drum corps with like these crazy rudimental chops, and then it's really hard to apply that to a recital program or to make that, you know, express something you're feeling. And I think one thing that I've realized, some compositions written by Texas composers or people with that background is like some people have a hard time, but some people have done it successfully, finding a way to create a snare drum that uses some of the language, but can still be a conscious thought or a work that has meaning behind it, that's not just chopping out, you know? And so that's something that I think is interesting about different, like going to Poland and seeing what they're doing over there and what people are doing here and then people doing there and there. And I think the biggest thing, because Soci was my first time at Soci was last year, and the whole chamber scene is so different, I feel like, in the East Coast, that I just think very regionally sometimes, and you can play music anywhere you want, but just to be exposed to that was like, oh man, it's really interesting to see how a culture, region, professors, people that are writing in that area of whatever part of the world, it really changes a lot with how students grow up and how they get impacted as players. So, that was just kind of a rambling, but yeah.
No, I think that's a really good point. Yeah, I like that. And even just like the different approaches to composing for these kinds of instruments. I have a couple of Sarah's other pieces in the Google Drive that I purchased from her at random points, and they're all kind of like this, where it's like maximum sustain, like in some cases it's like roll with cartwheel, Vic Firth, timpani mallets, because there's like it's all tone, no articulation, and like I really want to hear the instrument. And I feel like in this way you like really hear the vibraphone in a context that like someone who's writing on in Texas, for instance, wouldn't do that, or Dave Friedman, I think he lives in Europe, wouldn't do that, you know. Yeah. What was the other thing? I'm just gonna
Actually can jump in here.
Yeah, go ahead.
I am experiencing such a similar thing right now in grad school, coming from like a place where we were playing, you know, like sound art pieces, minimalism, avant-garde, theater, whatever. Like not like you're getting like a mix of a lot of different things, especially in percussion. And then coming to like I'm getting my master's at a conservatory. And it's different. like you walk into a lesson, you're like, okay, and I'm working on a piece right now that's for one piano. So two percussionists and two pianists. The two pianists at the piano, the two percussionists play in the inside of the piano. And it's like a play on like the Bartok sonata, or like those pieces that are like two percussion, two piano, but everyone's playing on the same instrument, like playing with mouths and all these different things. And you like walk into a lesson with something like that, and the writing is fine and everything, and he just looks at you and he's like, yeah, that's interesting. Your lesson teacher's like, I don't get it. Like, you know, like they like you can have like the pianist play and then the percussionist could play like a marimba. And you're like, okay. it's a very like people have very different and there are people in the Northeast that do like the more complex like if you've ever seen like improvisational music in the Northeast, it's a very, very specific kind of thing. It's more like avant-garde, but it's hard to thrive in a space. So I'm really glad that like we're able to talk about pieces like this and someone isn't like, why is the vibraphone just ringing for 2 minutes? That makes no sense. Because I've encountered that like daily here, and it's a really weird experience.
I just have to say, Trivy, I feel validated in hearing you say that. So thank you. Thank you.
I feel validated in you saying that you feel validated because I don't feel insane anymore. Like I cannot take someone writing another fugue again and being like, this is my magnum opus. And I'm like,
Yeah,
Okay.
good
Great.
job. When I
We did, sorry, I just gotta say,
no, you're good.
like we had a John Cage music service last night.
Mhm.
It was lit. Second one, let's go. But we legit had audience members that were like, that was fucking creepy. And I'm like, what do you mean it was creepy? And then we had people that like did not get it and just thought it was a joke, which was so weird and so different than my first experience with the music circus. Because my first experience in Ohio, like people, at least from my remembrance, tell me if I'm wrong, Joseph, people really dug it. People were like, this is cool. Whereas the second time, there were actually people, not a lot, but there were some people that were just like, no, this isn't real. This isn't art.
Yeah.
I think like even the John Cage stuff, it's like how you conceptualize, like how are you as the performer conceptualizing what's on the page and like what you're doing, and like it does at the end it doesn't matter because the listener is going to have like an entirely different perspective. Like when that first music circus when I did Child of Tree, I like barely prepped for it outside of like knowing like the instructions, and like I ate snap peas in a microphone because I was like, this is the plant material that I am using. Like I will crack it and then I will eat it into this like hot mic, and people are gonna like think this is so weird. Or they're gonna have the same perspective as me and just be like, this is so funny. Like and I'm like not breaking or like trying not to laugh about it, but I'm like sitting there holding a cabbage and it's like squeaking, and I'm like, this is so fucked up and like silly. And if somebody got that or someone was like, that's stupid, like it's up to them. But you know, there's also some folks that are like, no, it has to be you have to conceptualize John Cage as groovy, for instance. Or like, which I just don't agree with. Like, I don't think John Cage is groovy. I think John Cage is all about like sound and experience, right? Like Third Construction, sure, you play da 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 do dum dum da 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 do dum dum, but the really cool part is hearing someone play tin cans and then move to the edges of the tin cans and like hearing the change in sound, right? Like that's, or is that just my perspective, right? And I think that's where pieces like Cage's stuff or the Sarah Henney's even like how you hear it is, and like your perspective is truly yours and no one else. Like even where you're sitting in a hall listening to someone play settle, you're going to have a completely different aural experience than somebody else. Like the first time I listened to this, I heard like what sounded like a change in the voicing from the vibe player, where I was like, oh, now that mallet's coming out more. And then the second time we just listened to it, I like had an ear out for it and I didn't hear it at all. So I'm like, am I just crazy? Is it because I was listening to it with my speakers? Like, again, like musical, like this kind of music, I think just really the experience of it matters, just like Cage, I guess. But you know, if you think Cage is groovy, that's fine too. I shouldn't say like you're wrong, but I don't subscribe.
I will say I went to the percussion ensemble concert here. Because we're recording, I won't say where I go to school, but it's in a major town, and they had the guy who's supposed to run it is the principal percussionist of a local big shot symphony, and he's on sabbatical, so they had the principal timpanist running it, and he programmed Construction 2 and played like the inside part where you mute like the piano, and he was having a great time. So like, if the principal timpanist of this like huge big shot well endowed orchestra can program Cage and play on it and have a great time, I don't think it's the percussionists that are the problem. I think it might be like a larger systemic educational like what repertoire are we programming for people to learn problem.
Yeah, and when your only experience and knowledge of Cage is 433, like you're gonna think his music is a meme and like not musical, right? That being said, there's somebody who like has multiple videos of themselves playing 433 on their YouTube channel. It's a percussionist, and it makes me laugh every time I see them come up because I'm just like you have like 4 videos of you doing this. That's so wild to me. Oh, yeah. Any other thoughts on the Hennies? I was actually like the last thing I was gonna say was I'm thinking about maybe programming this. Like, so my school, we do a chamber music night that's like brass ensemble, percussion ensemble, and like other things. And that's our percussion ensemble concert right now because we are a smaller program. And I honestly am thinking about programming this piece for like 2 younger mallet players. It's just like this is your mallet duet, and like you're gonna experience something that's like way out of left field for like what you've grown up doing in like rural North Carolina or South Carolina. And you don't have a whole lot of notes to learn, but you gotta communicate like an effective product in a way, and like really think about what you're doing. We'll see how it goes. I think they'll buy in because my kids bought into lives too. It just didn't happen from a timing perspective on the program until like the day before. My area coordinator was like, "Oh yeah, if you want to do your 15-minute long chart, that's fine." I'm like, "Well, we haven't rehearsed it in a hot second, so never mind." But yeah.
Oh, I also think because we just got done with Gay Gorilla, and I think that sometimes we just like see minimalism and we're like, oh, it's just quarter notes, or oh, it's just eighth notes, and we like just like put it together real quick, and we are like, great, finished product, bang. But we spent a full year on this piece, and we didn't rehearse it every week. It was just like, once a month we'd get together and we'd play it. And I think there's a lot of ensemble skills that can be learned through it, and especially like a sense of like group time. Because when you're all playing straight eighth notes, it's really apparent when people ain't playing together. But sometimes that can be harder than you think, just because like that split second of thinking about what you're doing 30 minutes from now, like gets you off. And instead of it being a note, it's now a flam.
That piece is great. Like I don't get emotional when listening to pieces, but that piece like makes me emotional. That's really weird. I don't know why. But
I get super emotional over Stay on It.
really?
Yeah. You want me to explain why?
Sure, yeah.
I have
You're
this whole
comfortable.
story. So I feel like, granted, I haven't read the program notes, so I'm not 100% certain that this is like what the piece is about. But from like watching that piece like a few times now, I really feel like that piece is his frustration with the fact that like all these people, like he started out with all these people who like were for the cause that he was for, and that through all the chaos that can occur, either like people being threatened or people realizing for them that it's not worth it anymore, for like the strain, like people left the cause, and at the end there's like only one person playing, right?
Yeah.
And in the versions I've seen, it's always the pianist, and he was a pianist. And so I see it as like this piece is his frustration of like, we started off as such a big, strong group, but over time, like everybody's left, and now it's just him. And it's almost like his cry for help, for like, come back, like, don't stay on it, like, don't leave this cause.
Interesting. I
Yeah.
totally interpreted that middle piano solo as more of like he's remembering like himself, and he could like be in a church by himself and just like use the piano in the empty room, and like things got so bad that he's now like, I just need to like, maybe that's like me projecting, honestly. I feel
I
like
mean, my theory could just be me projecting too, you know?
that's what great art does. It lets you project. Crazy. Whoa.
I
Awesome.
played it at my senior recital. I played Stay On It at my senior recital with, I think it was clarinet, flute, violin, piano, vibraphone, and just like some mixed percussion. And prime example of like regional location university where you go to school. People are like, oh my God, this is like, how did you do that? I mean, it's like you guys are improvising the whole time. It's just like how, or it was like that was terrible. I hated that. It's like, all right, well, you know. So it's just it literally it's so the phenomenon of like where you're located or like who you work with or who you collaborate with or who is alongside you in school and what kind of community that is created. It can be received or not well received, or it can be like a cool exotic thing, like oh, you're really into that, and it's
Exotic.
like, you know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
it's so I found that really interesting that you guys brought that up. I was like, oh, I just played that, and it had a very interesting response. So, but I enjoyed it, so I had fun.
I was labeled as the person that liked or knew a lot about music technology at Ohio State because I played a piece with tape every single recital, and I was like, "You don't." Dr. Powell like never really, to my knowledge, ever did a lot of pieces with like electronics, if ever. So she was like, "This is not my wheelhouse." She's actually, there's like a whole myth that she is cursed when it comes to technology because like she'll just like touch your computer and it won't restart or whatever. Anyway,
And that's true. Legit.
and it is true.
I've seen
There-
it happen with my own eyes.
yeah, and there's like so many stories about it, but she was like, "Oh yeah, you're just like you're really into music technology and like electronics and like audio, right?" And I was like, "Uh, no, I mean, yeah, like yes, but I don't know how to like record myself to make a good video. I don't know how to splice things together. Like I just know how to click play on my MacBook for the vibe chart or the timpani piece that's the tom solo or whatever. But you get labeled like somebody has an experience and then you get labeled as like not even like contrary to an experience, but just like different from the experience. Like, oh, you do that. Like, yeah, you really like present a new perspective, and then you do like pieces of electronics, and it's like, well, have you looked outside? In some ways, it can be like that, but anyway, cool. Well, thank you guys. We're like this has been a very long discussion. Last meeting was pretty short, so maybe it's time for us to have a little longer session. For those of you that are checking out the recording after the fact, thanks again for listening. And anybody that had to leave the call partway through, we appreciate you. I'm going to go ahead and hit stop recording. So we'll see you guys in May. Okay.